we spoke about.
Okay, great. And so thanks for everyone for joining and taking the time today. On behalf of the Wisconsin Workforce Development Association, welcome to this webinar where we're going to hear from Jim Golombeski, who's the CEO of the Bay Area Workforce Development Board. We're going to hear from Jim's going to kind of talk about the American Job Center program from the local workforce board perspective, a little history on it and some background. Then we'll hear from Christine Porter. Christine is the Bureau Director at the Bureau of Job Services at the Department of Workforce Development at a state level. And then we'll also get a chance to hear from Ron Painter. Ron is the CEO of NAWB, the National Association of Workforce Development Boards. So Ron can give kind of a national perspective of what's happening and with the American Job Center program and why, what you need to know about it. I want to start by giving just a little blurb about the Talent Development Council. The Talent Development Council is a campaign of the Wisconsin Workforce Development Association that represents all 11 of the state's workforce development boards. The TDC, the Talent Development Council, is focused on helping the workforce boards connect to industry associations and employers in the state. We have a network of about 100 industry associations, many of whom are on the call this morning, that we've built a network to communicate with those folks. The reason that we've put together this Talent Development Council is for you as members to, number one, have access to programming like we've put on today, connection to decision makers, and being able to influence funding priorities with your local workforce development boards. So please feel free to visit the WWDA website at wwda.com for information about the Talent Development Council. So thank you very much for participating. I'm going to now turn it over to Jim Golombeski from the Bay Area Workforce Development Board. And Jim can tell us a little bit about America's Job Center program. So Jim, go ahead and take it away.
I will do that. Now, Josh, you told me I have about 90 minutes, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm the old guy.
You can talk as long as you want. I just remember I have the mute button. So.
I'm the old guy, and so I've seen all this stuff. So let me give you just a kind of a very brief summary. Back in 1994, the State Legislative Audit Bureau published this, and this was a report that identified that in Wisconsin we had 101 different workforce programs run through 12 different state agencies with a significant overlap in the customer bases we were serving, but virtually no coordination. So coming out of that study in the 90s, there was a real effort, but it was an effort that came from the bottom up to begin to coordinate workforce programs. We recognized here in Green Bay, where I am, for example, someone would have had to run all over town. Let's say a single mom on AFDC, which is what was the welfare program at that time, would have had to go one place for AFDC, another place for food stamps, another place for a work program, another place for medical assistance, all trying to balance kids and probably a vehicle that worked occasionally at best. So we began an effort in the 90s to begin to put everything into one location and to find a way where an individual could connect to all the appropriate programs with a minimum of effort. Well, I mean, that was a huge, and in fact, insurmountable job, dealing with 12 different state agencies, 12 different federal agencies, and all kinds of different program regulations. It didn't align very well. But we began working out those kinds of locally crafted solutions in the 90s. So in 1998, then, the federal government passed the Workforce Innovation Act, WIA or WIA. And what WIA did a couple of things. The first thing that it did is it took what had been a business-led board previously called a private industry council, renamed it as a workforce investment board or workforce development board, and gave us very limited authority, but the charge nonetheless to begin to pull all of these, all these different programs together. And unfortunately, that authority was fairly ill-defined. So in the early days, there was a lot of unhappiness trying to figure out what the role of the workforce boards was vis-a-vis these many programs. And again, a lot of local bottom-up kinds of things developed that began, there was a lot of experimenting going on. So one area of the state could look very different than another area of the state. In 2008, for a variety of reasons, the Department of Workforce Development decided to pull back from a major role in many of these job centers we had crafted together. And fortunately, that was a time, because of the large number of unemployed people during the Great Recession, as well as the federal stimulus bill, that we boards had the resources, and we began to assert ourselves and in effect keep job centers open, establishing ourselves as very key players in these local regions. The other big thing that happened during the first part of the 21st century was employers became a key customer. Prior to that, we operated on a social service model. How can I help you, you poor person? But during the early part with WIOA, employers became a key focus. So for example, in 2006, here in the Green Bay area, we created the Northeast Wisconsin Manufacturing Alliance, which has gone on to be one of the most successful industry partnerships in the country, because we wanted to help employers work together to meet their workforce needs. So then after that second decade of experimentation, in 2015, Congress passed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, and most of us here in the field had to go through every document in our buildings and put an O into it. But the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act brought in a couple new things. Number one, it established job centers as the focal delivery point in the country for workforce services. So in effect, it took all of these bottom-up local experiments we had done and blessed them and made them the primary way that people were to get service. It gave some, it gave some additional resources or additional authority to the workforce boards, but still not full authority. And so there's still a lot of trying to figure out who fits where. But the other big thing that WIOA did was it now required partners in the job center to pay for the infrastructure costs of the job centers. So we're still going through a process here trying to figure out how this is going to work and who's going to pay for what. And it's, even though WIOA is 5 years old, we're still trying to figure out how it all works. So looking forward, there are three things I would observe. The first thing is we've done a lot to create a one-stop system where our citizens can come in and have access to a variety of programs and services in one place. We are still, we're not perfect at that yet. And we're still, excuse me, we're still in the process of defining those roles, but we're further along than we were. And all of these bottom-up local experiments that happen are beginning to be standardized into a system national, well, statewide and nationally, that begins to look the same and feel the same. And certainly with the America's Job Center branding begins to have a common theme and a common logo. So while that's still in process, significant developments have happened. The second thing that's happened is we still don't exactly know where the major welfare programs fit. So that would be TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, which in Wisconsin we call W-2, and the Food Share Employment and Training Program. So while we're good partners, we're still kind of working around each other out there, and that very important relationship still it needs definition. And the third thing I would say looking forward is that our job center customer base is changing a great deal. And we need to have considerable discussion around how do we engage our millennial generation, our Gen X generation, and the group coming up behind the millennials, I call them the cloud, who are much less place-based, much less likely to go to a job center facility and much more likely to engage employment and training services on their smartphones or laptops or tablets. So we've come a long way in the 30 years of my career in terms of the level of partnership, what we know about each other, how we're able to help customers who are eligible for multiple services access those in the most effective, efficient way possible, although we still have a long way to go. We have come a long way in terms of our ability to meet the needs of employers. And looking ahead, the ground is shifting from under us a great deal. And we have to particularly figure out in the age of social media, what does a job center look like and how does it provide services? Thank you.
Jim, thanks a lot for that background. Really appreciate it. You know, from kind of the local job center standpoint, and you know, for those of you online, in Wisconsin we have 11 local workforce development boards. A map of that can be seen on our WWDA website. Now I'd like to turn it over to Christine Porter. And Ron Painter, thanks for joining us. We will unmute you and when Christine is finished. Christine is the Bureau of Job Services Director from the Department of Workforce Development. If folks have questions for our panelists, you know, please feel free to send me a message in the chat. If we don't get to those now, we can certainly get to those afterwards. So Christine, why don't you talk a little bit about America's Job Center program and kind of the role of that with Department of Workforce Development. And for folks, Christine is not going to share slides and her camera is off, so just know that that's all part of the plan. So go ahead, Christine.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am going to share the DWD, a page from our website, from the DWD website, and I believe if my technology there, can everyone see that? I hope.
Yes, we can see that, Christine.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'll just start with the umbrella of the Department of Workforce Development and move into the divisions, and then my bureau, the Bureau of Job Service, and some of the key factors that we bring to the state of Wisconsin. So our overarching umbrella, of course, is the Department of Workforce Development. And within the department, we have 6 divisions. And they are, I'll just bump up the screen a little bit. They are the divisions of Equal Rights, Employment and Training, which my bureau is under, the Operations Division, unemployment insurance, vocational rehabilitation, and workers' comp. Now, with the Bureau of Job Service being under the Division of Employment and Training, we're kind of fluctuating here in what I'll be telling you about pre-COVID, during COVID, and then I'm going to touch a little bit on after, or the reintegration process after COVID-19 is certainly taught us a lot of lessons and how we are moving forward. But in the Bureau of Job Service, we are the public labor exchange for the state of Wisconsin. You've probably heard of the Job Center of Wisconsin, and that is the state's public labor exchange. So we are responsible for that particular access point for job seekers and businesses. We also do the Reemployment Services Program, which is in coordination with unemployment insurance. Reemployment services are for folks that have lost a position through no fault of their own, and they are going to be accessing unemployment. And we hold, pre-COVID, we hold group meetings and then one-on-one services for individuals to help them find their next right job and to get their career plan in place, to do any assessments, as well as updating and making sure their resumes are as clean and neat as possible in their job search. In all of our WDAs, there are business services teams, and we are part of that coordinated service with business services. For any employers on the phone or on the webinar, the business service teams in your local areas are a wealth of information and access points for you. We administer the state of Wisconsin's Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Program, which is a very involved program for all of the individuals that come to Wisconsin seasonally to work in the fields and some of the processing plants. It's a very complicated program, but I will tell you that Wisconsin has been a leader since the late 1960s and the early 1970s within the country for our Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Program. And so very often we are called upon to provide assistance, information, and we are held to a pretty high standard of performance because we are considered a leader in this particular activity. We also work with the Trade Adjustment Act program. Some of you are probably very familiar with that. We have a job service call center, which handles hundreds and hundreds of calls every week. During COVID, we have had numbers as high as 2,500 on a daily basis. So that has kept everyone that are call center agents very, very busy. One of the other things that is up and coming that we've been working on for probably 2 years is our library partnerships. And pre-COVID, that was a very strong effort that we were coordinating throughout the state with the libraries and other partners as well. And now with COVID, of course, the libraries are seeing that when they start cautiously opening, they will have a large number of folks that will want to use their computer resources to file unemployment claims, to do job searches, and get some advice. So now our relationship with libraries is becoming much more animated, and we're looking at what levels of assistance that we can provide in the local library systems. So when Jim was talking about the one-stop shop for individuals to come into and seek out a variety of services, DET and the Bureau of Job Service is a key partner in all of the job centers. And truly, when you think of a one-stop shop, the job centers are an excellent example. People can walk in and we've got a lot of different activities they can access and programs and services that they can participate in. And very often, sometimes they will come in to ask questions. Some of the questions that we have on the phones right now are, when will the local food bank be open? Are there requirements that I must bring to access food or some other services? How can I apply for fuel assistance during this time? Just a wide variety of questions. So even if we aren't offering those services right under the roof of a job center, very often the staff involved in the job centers can point the customer in the right direction, which is extremely important when we look at all the things that are going on in our world right now. So I hit on some of the highlights of what our Bureau does in the local job centers and throughout the state of Wisconsin. Now, as with all of you, I'm sure your business or your workforce development board has gone through many changes with COVID-19. And I will tell you a little bit about what's going on in our Bureau. We have a staff of about 200 people across the state of Wisconsin. And when COVID became an up and coming topic, we knew, of course, that there would be a huge role that unemployment insurance would play. And that, in fact, as you are aware, is extremely true. So 44% of the Bureau of Job Service staff currently is assisting unemployment insurance with phone call, being part of their call center. We have some folks that are doing some adjudication, and a wide variety of services that we are offering through UI. And that was about a 6-month obligation, which started in April. So we, as I said, 44% of our staff is assisting UI. Then, if you recall, I mentioned our reemployment services, which prior to COVID was an in-person service delivery model. And when it became clear that we were going to be closing job centers and the partnerships would be closing job centers to customers, we quickly realized that 2 things would happen. We'd have to change how we delivered the reemployment services program, and we probably would be serving more folks with the reemployment services program with the uptick in unemployment claims that were going to be coming through. So we went to DOL, who funds this particular program, and DOL approved us to do all of our reemployment services over the phone. So we transitioned our reemployment services staff to doing individual one-on-one phone calls with folks using the same information and personalizing it to whatever local area they were in, the customer was in. So we have been providing our reemployment services virtually since April. And that would be a one-on-one phone call, as I mentioned. And so we have 8 to 9 sessions per day that our staff are doing at this time. And that really does become a full day. So a lot of the other things that we were doing, our business services, some of those folks are now working either in UI or doing some RESCA work or being on our call center, because of course, when you think of 2,000 calls in a day, 10 people, that's really hard to handle. So we did provide more folks to our call center so that we could have as quick of a response time as possible. So now that's kind of the transition into where we are now. So we are still doing the RESCA remotely and probably will for a period of time. We would have to go back to DOL and let them know that we are going to be circling back to our original DOL approved model, which is the in-person sessions and one-on-ones that I mentioned earlier. So when we start talking about when our job center is going to come back, when our resource room is going to be coming back, that is really conversations that are occurring right now, and they are occurring with all the partners. And it's a very thoughtful process. The concern that we have that's first and foremost, of course, is our customer and staff safety. And then we know that is a focal point. Our other focal point in my bureau, which as I mentioned, the Public Labor Exchange does include our resource rooms, is the staffing aspect. Because we have, as I said,
44% of the folks working on UI. We have a strong portion of people doing the one-on-one virtual reemployment services. And so that does not leave a whole lot of people to work in our resource rooms. We, of course, want to do that safely. We want to do that in strong partnership. I will give you an example of one of the things that our goal is that we would like each location to have a minimum of 2 months supplies of cleaning fluids, sanitizing wipes, masks for staff, all the things that we need to keep our resource rooms as clean and sanitary as possible. We are also looking at the possibility of appointments for folks that would like to use our resource rooms. We're looking at how we can access remotely into someone's job net so that if they have a question, we can remotely assist them, keeping in mind the 6-foot social distancing that we are all well aware of at this particular point. So there's lots of conversations happening and lots of steps that we are in the process of working through. I don't know if anyone out there would have a question about when we might open those resource rooms to within our job centers. I can tell you that we have not made a complete decision yet. It depends on many factors, including what our partners will be doing. So I invite any questions that you might have through chat, if you have some. I did want to touch a little bit more on our business services. There perhaps are some employers on this webinar, and I would like you to know that we have some three key areas that might be helpful to you as we move into this post-COVID world that hopefully is coming sooner rather than later. We can offer email blasts, targeted email blasts to your particular area. Those have been quite effective. We can also provide on-site interviews that you can send your staff into our job centers, and we can provide a room for you, and then also help guide any customers that you would have into your particular room for interviews. And then we also coordinate job fairs, which you're probably all very familiar with, and that is also a very partner activity that folks participate in. So those are things that our business services can do for you if you are interested in some of those opportunities. So Josh, that at this moment concludes any remarks that I would have, unless there are questions.
No, Christine, thank you very much for the overview and kind of the information about this. I guess one question I had though too is, can you talk a little bit about DWD's role in the job centers that we have across the state? In terms of staffing or oversight or responsibilities, looking at kind of the interplay between what the state does as opposed to what Jim and the folks at the local workforce developments do in terms of their role with the job center program.
Certainly. One of the things that occurs with DWD in partnership with the other folks that we've been discussing, we do provide funding for WIOA programs and services. That is the link. The money comes to DWD and then it gets placed within the workforce development boards. Also, our Bureau of Workforce Training within DET does monitor the local boards for WIOA programming. And of course is the umbrella over the Division of Employment and Training, which my bureau is under. So it's a long-standing partnership, and that while DWD does fund local boards in not only WIOA, but for a variety of other programs and services that are offered, it's still a very, in my opinion, a very collegial relationship with responsibilities and communication flowing between both between both entities. Did I answer that question well enough, Josh?
That's great. Yeah, no, appreciate it. Well, one other question we had from someone in the audience is about job fairs.
Yes.
In terms of, when will job fairs be going online? And I think that there's one answer to that. I think one thing that might also be worth mentioning is that we do have an upcoming announcement or upcoming job fair, which Bobby, who messaged everyone on the call from the Fox Valley Workforce Development Board, mentioned on July 15th. We're going to have the first ever statewide drive-through job fair. We're going to be having this simultaneously across all 11 regions of the state. And so please check back to the WWDA website for information on that. I guess, question for you though, Christine, is, when will job fairs be going online? Any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, actually, we are, from an internal perspective within DWD and DET, we are looking at what are the best software options to do that right at this particular time. And we don't really have an answer on that right now, Josh, that I'm comfortable sharing. But we are in the works of that because it's the smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do at this particular time. But I do know that I believe WDA 3 recently had a virtual job fair, and there is another region, and I apologize for not remembering exactly what region it is, that we are working with for a virtual job fair also, and that's up and coming. But I apologize profusely. I don't remember the specific detail on that, but I was aware of the July 15th one that's coming up, and that's very exciting, actually.
Well, thanks a lot, Christine. And we'll certainly put up information on not only the drive-through job fair, but other online job fairs as well through the WWDA website. So, Christine, thank you very much for the presentation and the information. If folks would like to contact Christine directly, please send me a message and I can get you her contact information. Next, I'd like to welcome Ron Painter from the National Association of Workforce Development Boards. Ron, thanks for taking the time today. We're really looking forward to kind of getting your perspective about America's Job Centers Network from a national perspective, and kind of sharing any insight from Washington as the resident smart guy here on the phone from Washington. So Ron, thank you very much for joining us.
Josh, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for your help in making this happen. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you all, and hope that we can get some run through these slides and then get some questions and hopefully get some opinions from you. So
I also, before you started, I did want to give one plug to the National Association of Workforce Development Boards. The WWDA is a new member of of the National Association of Workforce Development Boards, and it's a great opportunity for our members here in the state, the industry trade associations, for us to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in Washington and across the board. So thanks for your help and all the work you do, Ron. So go ahead and take it away.
You're welcome. We appreciate the support. Matt, if you want to hit the next one. So the National Association of Workforce Boards, we represent in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere the over 500 local business-led workforce development boards across the U.S. and the territories. And I say put the emphasis on local and business-led, because those are two things that we have consistently fought very hard for in Washington with regard to legislation, not only the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, but also in other pieces of legislation and in other conversations. We really firmly believe that you can solve the issues that face you with regard to the talent supply chain and workforce development if you have both the resources to do that, but also the accountability to do that. And we think those go hand in hand. So we work with the boards, we connect boards with industry trade associations at the national level. We do a lot of policy work. We do a lot of work, not only with, you might think traditionally workforce issues on Capitol Hill and with the White House, but we also do a fair amount of conversation back and forth with industry associations. So we have, and I know we have a list coming up of the associations that we work with, but a lot of times it's trying to help people understand the workforce development system that is out there so that we can begin to talk about not only accomplishments, but also potential challenges and opportunities. And again, we do this, as I mentioned, through, we provide technical assistance to some of the boards throughout the US as well. So sometimes there are issues that arise as to regulatory interpretation, the law, the interpretation of the law. So we do work there as well. You can hit the next one, Matt. So I mentioned that we have partnerships through our business alliance with the Hotel and Lodging Educational Institute, the Associated Builders and Contractors, the Solar Foundation. We also have work going with CompTIA, with heating and air conditioning, the National Landscapers Association, and we do work with the Walmart Foundation. We do work with Kellogg. Kellogg's funding us to do a fair amount of work. We're going to have a focus soon on Mississippi around family-centered employment and the issues that are there. We do work with the National Coalition of Credentialing Centers, NC3, which really focuses on not only identifying credentials that matter in businesses or in industries, particularly in the manufacturing sector, but also with community college and career and tech instructors in high school. How do you teach? How do you effectively teach credentials that arise from the work of Lincoln Electric or Snap-on Tools or 3M or Kubota, Festo, and a number of others. With regard to WIOA, one of the things that we thought was really critical in the change from the Workforce Innovation or the Workforce Investment Act, WIA, to WIOA is this notion that workforce development on the federal level had been historically seen as focus on social policy, dating back to, if you will, dating back way back into the 1860s with the introduction of the Morrill Act, which established land-grant universities and colleges, which focused on, and I always say this, sorry ladies, that focused on the boys coming off of the farm and who was going to train them, who was going to skill them in how to work in a factory. So land grants, we began this notion. It was all about social policy. How do we present people with opportunity? As we got more connected across the world, workforce development becomes an economic policy. It becomes an asset. Many of those of you who work in economic development know this. When a company's thinking about coming to your region or wants to expand in your region, one of the first questions they're going to ask is, well, what about workforce development? One of the things that we saw pre-COVID was a very, very tight labor market. I know in your area it wasn't unusual to find unemployment rates of 3%, some places sub 3%. So the focus began to be about career pathways. How does somebody get into a particular industry? What are the skills that are necessary to start? What are the skills along the way? We started to think about talent in a different way. We started to think about it as a supply chain in and of itself. How do these pieces connect? So a lot of the work that we do now at the national level is around how do these pieces called PK, K through 12, 2-year, 4-year, 1-year, certificates. How does all of this add up to a workforce development system across the U.S. and the territories? So there's far more focus on that at the moment. I think the role of the workforce boards has been seen as growing more and more strategic in terms of how do you understand the assets in your region? How do you develop a regional strategy? How do you look at, do the pieces add up to the whole? You find a lot of people doing really good work. In some places, I've called it islands of excellence. You have pieces of that workforce system doing good work, but how does it add up? Does it all add up? And how does that message, who carries that message back to funders about potential gaps in your workforce development system? So Matt, you can go to the next one. So we convene partnerships. Workforce boards across the country convene a ton of partnerships between businesses, industries, between education providers, community-based, faith-based organizations, critical factor or local elected officials. Local elected governments in the US spend $25 billion a year on economic development. We think local workforce boards are one of the best ways, the best insurances to understand the risk of those investments, the risk of workforce development investments, and what makes both of those pay off. How do you establish a good return on an investment? As I look at Wisconsin, there's a couple of things that I want to mention. I've been up in part of your territory from time to time. Last year, I had the opportunity to be up in Duluth and then come across the border into Superior. And while you all see that as well, it's just natural. People live and work in both areas. Regional work is really hard to begin with. Secondly, when you start crossing state lines, that's really hard. So you're to be congratulated for doing that, for thinking about the region, working regionally, trying to address this and to take advantage of some great universities that you have in that area. One of the other things that I think you're doing that is really stunning to me and really, I think, an example for the rest of the country. Prior to COVID-19, you had about 20 work share plans that had been filed across the state. You had about 800 some people who actually participated in those plans. From the beginning of COVID through some point in June, you had over 520 plans filed around work share, covering almost 18,000 people in Wisconsin. We're going to be highlighting this work share in our forum, which is coming up the end of the month, June 29th, 30th, and July 1st, as we do a transatlantic panel. We'll have a couple panelists from Europe and a couple of folks from the US. And part of what we think we should be learning from Europe is work share. There are issues that I'm sure you're experiencing, we're experiencing nationally with how we do UI. And I think that work share is one of the solutions that I think here in the States we could learn some pointers from our colleagues in Europe. And now, we're going to be trying to figure out, we're going to be trying to learn more about the experiences you have on WorkShare. Matt, if you want to go to the last slide, and then Josh, I'm really anxious to take questions if we have them. If you want to learn more, we do something called Workforce Central. It's a series of podcasts where it gives us the opportunity to talk about issues more in depth. And you're happy to tune into that and connect with us at NAWB at nawb.org, and we will be happy to get back to you on issues that may arise or questions that you may have. So Josh, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there, and really anxious if we have questions, or happy to take those as well.
No, Ron, thank you very much. That was a helpful overview on things. I guess one thing, given your role in Washington D.C., there always seems to be some kind of crisis of the day that you're looking for local support on, or letters to electeds or calls to folks. Is there anything right now brewing that the 100 or so industry trade associations representing thousands of employers here in the state could do? Or and I don't mean to put you on the spot, and if there's not now, we can certainly, I guess we can let folks know that as a local member of NAWB, the WWDA can certainly be a platform. So that idea of is there anything pressing now that we can?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Josh. I think right now one of the things that we've experienced, and I'm going to suggest this is part of this is my opinion, and that was the assumption that we didn't need to deal with additional workforce development dollars in the initial COVID relief bills. I think part of the process has been, or part of the thought process was, well, when we reopen, everybody's going to go back to work and it will just be fine. And our conversations with economists, our conversations with business, we do a lot of work. We do a lot of data analysis with our national partners. So we partner with the Fourth Economy, with Chamara, with Burning Glass, with the MSI, and Dun & Bradstreet. So when we were huddling with all of them, we were looking at data that told us there were some of the industry sectors that were getting soft in terms of employment gains prior to COVID-19. So we already knew that there were some soft spots in the US economy. Certainly COVID was a dramatic shock to not only the healthcare system, but also to the entire economic system of the US. So we know coming out of COVID that there will be some businesses that will not survive. So that means there will be people, and Christine mentioned this earlier, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be coming to Wisconsin's One Stops. Nationally, about 16 million people a year are seen by the network of One Stops across the country. So we know that some people are going to be coming in because the employer that they work for aren't there anymore. Secondly, we know that there are going to be individuals who may go back to the same employer, but they're going to go back to a different job because we've learned how to do technology better. We've learned how to integrate it better into what we do. So workforce development funding we believe is going to be critical. And right now, the Senate needs to hear that workforce development funding is critical. It does need to be a part of the negotiations in the fourth relief bill, which we now anticipate. We know that there's conversations going on Capitol Hill now. We think that there's going to be more serious conversations about a COVID-4 when they come back from the July 4th recess. The House is already gone, and the Senate will be leaving shortly. So I really think this is an opportunity for the workforce boards, for you, Josh, as the state association, to have those conversations with business, to work with economic development, to look at the businesses that are having problems, are going to have issues, and figure out what can we do with incumbent workers, what do we need to be doing in terms of skill development, and that add that price up and let us know where you see the need for additional funds. This is a critical point in time, and we do think that additional WIOA funds are essential to be put into COVID-4.
Ron, thanks a lot, and I think that that's great advice. And as we started this, I talked a little bit about reasons for involvement in our Talent Development Council, which is kind of the campaign of employers. And like I talked about earlier, the 3 reasons are access to programming like this, connection to decision makers, and being able to influence funding priorities. And I think for our members and for the folks on the call, recognizing that, we as a state association have connections with organizations like NAWB nationally, that we're really focused on as workforce development boards, connecting with employers and economic development groups to develop those partnerships. So want to thank you, Ron, for your presentation. Jim Golombeski, certainly want to thank you kind of for that local perspective and the historical kind of look at that. Christine, special thanks to the Department of Workforce Development and the perspective that you've shared. So folks, there's a couple links that have been shared by Ron's colleague Matt in the chat section in terms of how to get involved with some of our national advocacy efforts. Again, whether it's things that are driven by national groups in Washington or needs that you have as employers or trade groups, please let us know here in Wisconsin. So thank you everyone for your time today. And with that, I think we'll close, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Josh. Really appreciate the support and the opportunity to be on today.
All right.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.